For years, the world believed Al Pacino moved through Hollywood surrounded by respect, loyalty, and the admiration of every actor who stood beside him. We thought the friendships on screen were real. We thought the bonds behind the scenes were unbreakable, but the truth is far more unsettling. At 85, Pacino finally opened a door he kept locked for most of his life. He revealed that there were 7 actors he could never work with again. 7 people who turned collaboration into conflict. 7 names that left bruises deep enough to last decades. Some were heroes he once worshipped. Some were partners he trusted. And some were rising stars who shattered his expectations the moment the cameras stopped rolling. These feuds did not fade. They marked careers. They rewrote relationships. They created whispers that still echo through Hollywood halls today. So stay with me, because once you hear the real stories, you will never look at Pacino or his legendary co-stars the same way again. Before we dive into the first name on his list, take a second to subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this. And tell me in the comments, what year were you born? I want to see which generations are watching tonight. The first name on Pacino's list was not a small surprise. It was the kind of shock that sits in a person's chest for a lifetime. Marlon Brando, the man he once studied like a disciple studying a prophet. To understand why this hurts so deeply, we have to travel back to the year 1972. The Godfather was just beginning. Pacino was 31, quiet, hungry, and still unsure if Hollywood would keep him or spit him out. He stepped onto that set like a young musician stepping onto a stage built by giants. And then Brando entered. People did not call Brando a legend. They called him a universe, a force of nature wrapped inside a human body. When he walked into a room, the air changed shape. Even veteran crew members straightened their backs when they heard him approaching. Pacino later described the feeling without using any poetic words. Standing across from Brando felt like waiting for a ship that never docks. You never knew what Brando would throw at you. He shifted his voice, rearranged lines, altered his movements, adjusted props, and followed impulses that only he understood. One assistant director claimed that in the first few days of shooting, almost half an hour of rehearsed material had to be abandoned because Brando suddenly felt something different that morning. For a newcomer desperate to prove he belonged, it was like trying to build a house on soft sand. Pacino admired the man. Yes, but admiration can become a prison when the person you admire refuses to give you steady ground. Still, Pacino quietly constructed Michael Corleone. He used patience like a weapon. He observed. He absorbed. He delivered the coldest transformation in the story. Later analysis showed that the film contained over 100 emotional pivots, and Pacino carried well over 2/3 of them on his shoulders. But then came the moment that shifted everything. The Academy Awards of 1973. Brando received a nomination for Best Actor. Pacino, the man who charted Michael Corleone's entire descent, was placed in the Supporting Actor category. Supporting, a word that felt like a slap. Pacino did not attend the ceremony. He stayed away, wounded in a way he never admitted out loud. According to one studio insider, he did not blame the Academy. He blamed the idea that Brando was seen as the one who held the film together, as if Pacino were simply orbiting him like a small moon circling a massive planet. Brando never addressed the matter. He did not reach out to reassure the younger actor. He simply moved on with the calmness of a man who knew the world would always bend around him. Reporters asked both men about each other in the years that followed. Pacino learned to answer with polite smiles that hid entire storms. Brando responded mostly with silence, which was somehow even louder. And that silence became the final truth. The rift never healed. They never stood together in front of cameras again. Never shared another interview. Never exchanged another moment of warmth. One cinematographer who worked around both men summed it up with blunt honesty. Brando behaved like a weather system. Pacino operated like a surgeon. Weather destroys. Surgeons remember every fracture. What the world celebrated as the greatest partnership in film history was behind the lights, a quiet frozen distance, a cold war built not on anger but on disappointment, a separation that shaped Pacino's approach to respect. loyalty, and collaboration for the next 5 decades. On screen, they looked inseparable. Off screen, they stood worlds apart. A fictional family immortalized in cinema and a real wound carved into Pacino's heart. The second name on Pacino's list was not an enemy. It was someone he never expected to clash with, Leonardo DiCaprio, a younger star who grew up looking at Pacino the way a rookie pitcher studies a Hall of Famer before stepping onto the mound. Their story began decades after the Corleone era. It was the year 2019, on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. DiCaprio was in his mid-40s by then, accomplished, respected, already carrying the weight of an Oscar on his shelf. Yet around Pacino, he reverted to something softer, almost boyish. People close to the production said that Leonardo treated Pacino like the final professor he had always wanted. Leo prepared for the film the way he prepared for his entire career. With obsession, his script looked like a battlefield of handwritten notes, entire margins filled with character history, additional meetings with researchers, voice coaches, costume experts, even a film historian to understand the cultural jokes of the era. One wardrobe assistant said that DiCaprio requested multiple fittings until he felt his character breathing for real. To him, preparation was a form of devotion. To Pacino, it was clutter. Pacino came from an older world, the world of instinct and emotional lightning. He built characters from the inside out. He did not want 10 layers of research between him and the moment. He wanted contact, impact, heat. And when he walked into the table, read and saw DiCaprio buried under pages of notes, he felt a gap open between them. During that early rehearsal, Leo expected guidance, encouragement, maybe even the kind of mentorship he had dreamed of since he was a teenager, studying Pacino's films on repeat. But what he received was distance, a kind of cold dismissal that no one in the room expected. Crew members later whispered that the air grew heavier each time DiCaprio asked a technical question. Pacino simply leaned back, closed his eyes, and acted like the information floated right past him. One production assistant claimed there was a moment that changed the room. When Leonardo explained a detailed timeline of his character's emotional life, Pacino responded with only a slow nod. He lifted his eyebrows as if to say enough, and the room fell quiet. From that point on, DiCaprio's enthusiasm turned into caution. For a man who had idolized Pacino since childhood, that caution felt like heartbreak. Leonardo once told friends that the hardest part of working with your heroes is discovering they are not looking at the same dream you are. Pacino saw Leonardo's method as a cage made of research. DiCaprio saw Pacino's improvisational fire as a mountain he could never climb. Insiders claim that after filming, Pacino privately told a close friend that DiCaprio had the mind of an academic who needed to let the pages burn. When Leonardo heard about that remark secondhand, he laughed. But people close to him said the laughter did not reach his eyes. Their relationship never turned into a feud, but it never became a friendship either. It stayed suspended in a strange quiet, a bond that should have formed but never found its shape. Then in late 2024, they were seen having lunch in Los Angeles with DiCaprio's father. Witnesses said Pacino smiled at Leonardo in a way he never had on set. A small gesture, a late apology, or maybe just acceptance. Whatever it was, the disappointment lingered like a shadow behind both men. A reminder that admiration is fragile, and meeting your heroes can sometimes leave an unexpected bruise. The third name on Pacino's list belonged to a man who seemed destined to stand beside him on screen. Tom Cruise, a powerhouse in his own right, a comet that lit up every franchise it passed through. Hollywood expected that when Pacino and Cruise finally worked together, the result would shake theaters from coast to coast. Instead, the partnership crumbled before the camera even had a chance to blink. Their story began in the early 2000s, when director Michael Mann was shaping the film that would later be known as Collateral. The idea on paper was electric. Pacino as the weary cab driver, Cruise as the cold professional killer. Two actors from two different generations, two different worlds. A collision everyone wanted to witness, but the trouble started long before the first shot. Cruise approached the role with the intensity of a soldier training for battle. By the time rehearsals began, he had already spent weeks studying the psychology of contract killers. He practiced weapon handling until his hands moved like a metronome. He created entire timelines of his character's childhood. He trained with real drivers. He memorized sections of true crime reports. Even his diet had been adjusted to match the supposed habits of his fictional hitman. To Cruise, this was discipline. To Pacino, it was a wall. Pacino had built his entire artistic identity around something very different: instinct, stillness, spontaneity, the kind of acting that arrives like a spark in the dark. He did not want to rehearse every emotional turn until it felt like a math equation. He wanted breath. He wanted uncertainty. He wanted the moment to choose him, not the other way around. One assistant who watched their early table reads described the contrast with a simple image. Cruise entered the room like a fully assembled machine. Pacino entered like a pair of hands searching for raw clay. During one rehearsal, Cruise offered a long and detailed breakdown of his character's motivations in a particular scene. His explanation wandered through childhood trauma, environmental factors, behavioral patterns, and an entire inner monologue that none of the writers had ever considered. When he finished, the room waited for Pacino to respond. Pacino sat in silence for a full 10 seconds. Then he sighed and said only that he needed to feel something real in the present moment, not study where a fictional man attended elementary school. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Cruise kept his posture straight, almost immovable. Pacino's expression stayed calm, but his patience had a crack running through it. The two men tried to continue, but every exercise revealed the same truth. Cruise relied on design. Pacino relied on fire. One crew member later said that watching the pair rehearse was like watching a chess player challenge a street fighter. Both skilled, both powerful, but their languages did not match. The breaking point arrived during an improvisation session. Pacino threw out the script to search for an emotional spark. Cruise held firmly to his planned beats. The scene sputtered like an engine fighting against two incompatible gears. Pacino leaned close to Cruise with a tired look in his eyes and murmured something the crew still remembers. He told Cruise that preparation is useful, but eventually an actor must let the library burn, so something alive can rise from the ashes. The next morning, everything shifted. Pacino quietly stepped out of the project. Jamie Foxx was brought in and later earned an Academy Award nomination. Cruise remained professional. Pacino remained silent. Their paths never crossed again in any meaningful way. Hollywood had expected them to create a cinematic earthquake. Instead, all it received was a brief spark and a long, cold distance. And for Pacino, the experience became a reminder that even legends can fail to speak the same artistic language, and that sometimes two titans standing side by side are simply not meant to share the same screen. The fourth name on Pacino's list belonged to a man the audience believed he had effortless chemistry with: Kevin Spacey. When they appeared together in the early 90s in the film Glengarry Glen Ross, critics praised their scenes as if the tension had been handcrafted by fate. What no one knew was that the electricity on screen came from something far less poetic and far more uncomfortable. Their clash started quietly, almost invisibly, like two musicians playing in the same room while hearing different songs in their heads. Pacino came from a school of acting built on instinct. Emotion first, thought later. He let the moment rise in his chest and hit the room like a wave. Spacey came from the opposite direction. Everything for him was structure, calculation, strategy. He broke each line into small pieces, examined the rhythm of every breath, and diagrammed scenes the way an engineer diagrams a bridge. The difference was immediate. During the first week of filming, a crew member kept a small notebook of observations. In it, he wrote that Spacey repeatedly rehearsed the same sentence more than 20 times before each take, adjusting pauses and inflections with painful precision. Pacino, meanwhile, preferred to walk onto set unscripted in his body, letting the moment sculpt itself. One afternoon during a complicated dialogue scene, Pacino released a burst of raw energy that sent everyone in the room backwards a little. When the director cut, Spacey frowned and asked for another take because he wanted to fix the exact placement of his tone. Pacino stared at him with tired eyes, as if he had just watched someone drain all the oxygen out of the room. From that moment, the divide only grew. A lighting technician later claimed that he witnessed Pacino walk in circles after one rehearsal, muttering to himself that Spacey was performing acting instead of simply letting it breathe. He did not say it cruelly. He said it like a man who had reached a limit. Spacey, on the other hand, believed Pacino relied too heavily on chaos. He once told a friend that Pacino treated scenes like thunderstorms, loud and unpredictable. To Spacey, that style felt reckless. To Pacino, Spacey's method felt suffocating, like someone placing a lid on a boiling pot. The tension came to a head during a late evening shoot. Pacino delivered a take filled with grit and heat, the kind of work that made the entire crew fall silent. When the director called cut, Spacey calmly suggested another run so he could refine his phrasing. That was the moment Pacino's patience snapped. His voice carried across the set as he said that some actors were still rehearsing, even when the camera was already rolling. No one spoke after that. The room turned cold. They finished the film professionally, but the air between them never thawed. When press tours came around, both men gave polite answers. Professional compliments. Short smiles that never reached their eyes. Years later, when Pacino participated in a public question and answer session, he made a remark about certain performers who refused to let go of preparation once the director called action. He never mentioned a name. He did not need to. The truth lingered in the space between his words. Pacino and Spacey never worked together again, never attempted another collaboration, never even shared a casual conversation after filming wrapped. Their partnership on screen looked electric. Off-screen, it was frost meeting fire, two styles that could not breathe in the same room, and two men who walked away realizing that talent alone cannot erase a divided artistic soul. The fifth name on Pacino's list was one the public always assumed he respected deeply: Dustin Hoffman. Two titans of the 1970s. Two men who reshaped American acting. But when fate tried to place them in the same room, what followed was not harmony. It was collision. A collision so strong that it killed an entire film before a single frame was ever shot. Their story began in the year 1974, when director Sidney Lumet attempted to bring together two of the most celebrated performers of the era for a project about the Attica prison uprising. On paper, it looked like a dream team. Pacino with his volcanic emotional power, Hoffman with his meticulous psychological depth. Hollywood insiders predicted awards before casting was even finalized, but the first table read shattered those predictions. Hoffman entered the room carrying stacks of research binders, pages covered in diagrams, detailed breakdowns of motives. Entire psychological histories for characters that had only a few lines in the script. One assistant recalled that Hoffman arrived with so much material that a production assistant had to help him carry it all. Pacino arrived with none of that. He came with his hands empty and his senses sharp. From the moment they began reading, the difference between them felt like two separate belief systems trying to use the same prayer book. Hoffman attacked every line with analysis. He questioned the root of each emotional beat. He stopped the reading repeatedly to examine character intentions long before the scene ever breathed. Pacino absorbed all of this with patience, but that patience lasted only so long. About halfway through the session, Hoffman paused again to ask about a minor emotional shift. He wanted to explore the symbolic meaning behind a gesture the character might make. The room fell silent as Hoffman launched into another deep academic monologue. Pacino finally leaned forward and released his first spark of frustration. He told Hoffman that they were not surgeons performing an autopsy, but artists trying to bring a pulse to something fragile. The comparison hit the table like a dropped weight. Hoffman's eyes narrowed. He stared at Pacino with a kind of stunned disbelief, as if someone had insulted the very foundation of his craft. But the clash did not end there. The next day, Lumet attempted an improvisational workshop. He hoped that removing structure for a moment might help the two men find a common rhythm. Instead, it revealed how far apart they were. Hoffman dissected every improv attempt. He asked why. He asked how. He asked what the character had eaten for breakfast. Pacino felt the air tightening around him. His voice rose. His hand slammed the table. And he told Hoffman to stop building the violin and start playing the music. The room froze. Even Lumet admitted later that he knew the project was doomed at that exact moment. Over the next few days, the distance only widened. Hoffman viewed Pacino's approach as reckless, emotional guesswork. Pacino viewed Hoffman's method as suffocating, like trying to breathe inside a room filled with instruction manuals. Two actors at the top of their field stood inches apart, yet spiritually miles away. Eventually, Lumet made the decision that no director wants to make. He shut down the film entirely. No costumes, no sets, no rehearsals. The project simply evaporated, carried off by the weight of two opposing artistic worlds. Both men went on to dominate the decade. Both earned awards. Both shaped generations of actors. But they never stood together again on any set. They avoided each other the way people avoid a fire they once got too close to. What the world believed would be one of the greatest partnerships in screen history became instead one of Hollywood's quietest Cold Wars. Not born from hatred, but from two philosophies that could not live in the same breathing space. For Pacino, the experience became a reminder that talent can connect people, but artistic faith can divide them faster than anything else. The sixth name on Pacino's list belonged to a man known for disappearing into his characters so completely that people often forgot where the real person ended. Jared Leto, a performer praised for his extreme devotion, a chameleon who reshaped his body, his voice, and even the rhythm of his breath to become someone else. But when that devotion collided with Pacino's older and more grounded philosophy, the result was not admiration. It was exhaustion, and eventually, frustration. Their story unfolded during the making of House of Gucci in the year 2021, a film filled with wealth, betrayal, and operatic emotion. But behind the scenes, an entirely different drama was unfolding. Pacino arrived on set carrying decades of experience that taught him how to enter a role without losing himself. He believed in presence, in the pulse of the moment, in letting truth rise naturally like smoke from a fire. Leto approached the craft from the opposite direction. He believed in total immersion, transforming every inch of himself until the line between actor and character dissolved completely. On the first day Pacino saw him in full prosthetics, he did not realize he was speaking to the man hired to play his son. One crew member claimed that Pacino looked as if he had seen a stranger walk into his house wearing clothes that belonged to someone he knew. The confusion lasted only a few seconds, but those seconds left a mark. Leto maintained the character long after the director called cut. He used the accent. He walked with the same exaggerated posture. He improvised jokes no one understood. He offered emotional reactions that were not called for in the script, at lunch, at rehearsals, even during lighting adjustments. Leto stayed inside the skin of the man he played. At first, Pacino tried to adapt. He treated Leto with patience, assuming the method was simply a warm-up. But as days passed, it grew heavier. One assistant described their dynamic as two clocks ticking at different speeds. Pacino worked with a slow, intentional rhythm. Leto spun like a toy, winding itself a little too tightly. Their energy did not match, and the mismatch frayed the edges of every scene they shared. The breaking point arrived during a long afternoon shoot. Pacino finished his take and lowered his shoulders, signaling he was ready to reset. But Leto remained in character, pacing, muttering, adjusting props that had already been set. The crew waited. The lights heated the room. The director prepared for the next angle. Still, Leto kept going. Unaware that the scene had ended, Pacino finally turned to the director and, in a voice tired but clear, asked the man to tell Leto the scene was over and that he could return when the cameras were actually rolling. The entire crew fell into a stunned silence. The message was unmistakable. Pacino had reached the limit of his patience. After that day, their interactions became polite but distant. They did not argue. They did not confront each other. They simply worked side by side like strangers who shared a hallway, but not a home. When the film premiered, both men smiled for the cameras, but their distance showed in the spaces between those smiles. Behind closed doors, insiders said Pacino requested fewer joint interviews and avoided unnecessary promotional events with Leto, not out of anger, but out of fatigue. They never worked together again, and the silence spoke louder than any feud. For Pacino, Leto represented a kind of performance that felt less like truth and more like a mask worn too tightly. And for a man who spent his life searching for authenticity in every moment, that mask became something he could never fully accept. The seventh name on Pacino's list was one fans never suspected: Johnny Depp. To the world, their partnership in Donnie Brasco looked effortless, a seasoned mentor guiding a rising star through a world of danger and loyalty. The truth behind the camera was far more complicated, shaped by two different creative engines that never managed to run on the same fuel. Their story began in the year 1996, during rehearsals for the film. Depp was in his early 30s, deep into his chameleon phase, crafting characters the way sculptors shape clay. Pacino, nearing 60, carried decades of craft that relied less on surface and more on the pulse underneath the scene. From the first table read, the contrast was unmistakable. Depp entered with a suitcase of notebooks, voice patterns, gestural ideas, and small quirks he believed belonged to the undercover agent he was playing. He observed people in Brooklyn bars, practiced specific ways of holding a glass, and spent hours on the set touching props just to feel a sense of ownership. Pacino arrived with a different intention. He moved slowly. He listened. He looked for the emotional center of the moment, not the decorations built around it. One producer later described the difference as watching an architect meet a street poet. Both brilliant, both committed, but arriving at truth from opposing directions. As rehearsals deepened, their separation grew sharper. Depp often requested renewed takes so he could adjust tiny details: the angle of his hand, the length of a pause, the weight of a sigh. Pacino watched with patient confusion, trying to enter the scene emotionally only to be interrupted by another adjustment. During a long evening rehearsal, the tension finally appeared. The scene took place inside a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. The room was humid, filled with the smell of pasta and steam from the kitchen. Depp prepared for the scene by retreating into silence, repeating small gestures under his breath. Pacino stood beside him, waiting to feel the emotional spark he needed. When the scene began, Pacino locked into character instantly, offering a grounded presence meant to anchor the young undercover agent. But Depp delivered a performance so focused on external detail that Pacino felt he was acting alongside an empty shell. When the director called cut, Pacino paused for a long moment. Then he asked Depp a question that echoed across the set. "Where are you right now? Because you are not here with me." The room froze. Crew members exchanged worried glances. Depp looked stunned, almost wounded, as if he had been pulled out of a deep tunnel. In the days that followed, producer Barry Levinson tried to smooth the air between them, arranging small meetings and quiet conversations, but the gap stayed. Depp believed Pacino's style was unpredictable, even volatile. Pacino believed Depp was too focused on surface choices and not present enough to share a living moment. They finished the film professionally, but the distance never melted. On screen, they created magic. Off screen, they hovered around each other like two satellites stuck in different orbits. Years later, Depp spoke publicly about Pacino in a tone that mixed admiration with a hint of unease. He joked that Pacino was too intense to spend a night around. People laughed, but those who had been on the Donnie Brasco set recognized a trace of truth hidden in that humor. Pacino remained silent. He offered polite words when asked in interviews but avoided any deeper reflection. Silence became his final verdict. They never worked together again, never reunited for anniversaries, never sat side by side in later discussions of the film. For the audience, Donnie Brasco was a portrait of brotherhood forged in secrecy and danger. For the men who brought it to life, it was a reminder that chemistry on screen can be a perfect illusion, and that behind the curtain, Two great actors can stand only a few feet apart, yet feel like they are living on different planets. When we look back at these 7 chapters, a clear truth begins to rise above all the stories. Even the greatest icons of our time walk through battles the public never sees. Talent does not protect you from conflict. Fame does not guarantee harmony. And success does not erase the weight of clashing visions, wounded pride, or artistic differences that can linger for decades. What we witness through Pacino Journey is a portrait of a man who grew not from easy partnerships but from complicated ones. Every encounter left a mark. Every collaboration, whether inspiring or painful, shaped the way he approached his craft and the way he understood himself. From Brando, he learned that admiration can cut deeper than rivalry. From DiCaprio, he realized that different generations carry different dreams. From Cruise, he discovered that discipline and instinct do not always meet in the middle. From Spacey and Hoffman, he saw how two brilliant minds can still block each other completely. From Leto and Depp, he learned that presence matters more than any crafted surface. Each experience taught him something essential, that artistry is not about perfection, it is about truth, real truth, the kind that shows up in the moment, unplanned and alive. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us listening now. Our lives are filled with people whose rhythms clash with ours. Some challenge us, some lift us up, some drain us, some teach us what we must protect in ourselves. You do not grow only through harmony. You also grow through friction, through confronting what does not work, through discovering who you are when everything around you pushes back. Pacino's story reminds us that conflict is not the enemy of greatness. Avoiding growth is. If this journey through his hidden history gave you something meaningful, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can join us for the next story. Each new chapter becomes possible because of your presence here. And before you go, I want to know something personal from you. What year were you born? Tell me in the comments below. I want to see the different generations gathered together, listening to these stories and finding their own truths within them, within them, within them, within them.